What do you mean by tearing my passport today on our honeymoon? As we finished packing and were about to leave, my husband unbelievably tore my passport with brute force. His smug expression only irritated me further. I never intended to go with you from the beginning. It was always going to be me and Mom. I had sensed something ominous before we got married, but I never imagined the twisted relationship between my husband and his mother would go this far. Having my honeymoon hijacked by my mother-in-law was something unheard of in my circles. Amidst the shock and anger of this unbelievable situation, what overwhelmed me most was the feeling of this is creepy. Had I chosen a completely wrong person as my partner? As my husband started cutting the passport with scissors and his mother smirked beside him, I thought I had to escape from there as soon as possible. I never expected things to turn out this way, but I had the perfect material to bring these two down to hell. My name is Emily, 29 years old, and in my 7th year of working. As a woman in the peak of happiness, having received a long-awaited proposal from my boyfriend of 4 years, and with a wedding and honeymoon ahead. I met my husband after becoming a working adult. I was always a plain type, and although I got my first boyfriend in college and naturally fizzled out as he probably lost interest in quiet and interesting me. This series passed without any serious relationships with men until I started working. It's that I, of all people, would be one of the first in my cohort to marry surprised me the most. My husband, a senior at the company, always supported me when I struggled with new tasks as a newcomer. My only previous boyfriend was a classmate, but a man 5 years older felt more dependable and trustworthy. I was truly happy when he asked me out. And the dolphin figurine we bought on our first date at the aquarium is still my treasure. When I was asked to consider marriage, I felt like I was soaring to the heavens. After that, we went on many dates, and the proposal came at the aquarium where we had our first date. Could I be this happy? I still remember not being able to sleep that night because I was too happy. Carried away by these feelings, we quickly went to greet his parents the following week. However, this visit started to sow seeds of doubt about the marriage. His father was very kind, but his mother clearly didn't like me and said bluntly, "You could have married a more wonderful girl, not someone plain like her." Being confronted with this at our first meeting made me suddenly anxious about married life, but I told myself that pre-wedding jitters were no more and continued with the wedding preparations, ignoring my unease. While discussing post-marriage life, he and his mother assumed I would quit my job. Of course, agitation, I had once dreamed of quitting upon marriage, but at that time, leaving my job was not an option for me. In retrospect, I think I couldn't dispel my marriage doubts and couldn't bring myself to leave my job, which was my safe space. But despite his mother's insistence on quitting, I decided to continue working at the same company as him, evading her demands. As we prepared for the wedding, he and I disagreed on the timing of our marriage registration. I wanted to register our marriage after the ceremony, but he wanted to do it sooner. respecting his wishes, we registered our marriage first. We went to the city hall together to submit the marriage registration. The procedure felt anticlimactic, but knowing we were officially married made me genuinely happy. Thus, on our way back, we discussed having a small, intimate wedding ceremony. However, it seems he mentioned this to his mother because the next day she contacted me. What are you thinking? Planning a small wedding for John. It must be grand. And keep your side of the guest minimal. Just close friends and family. I don't want your plain friends ruining the mood. She bombarded me with decisions about the venue and guests. I was upset about her interference, but didn't want to start a conflict right away. Although I had a lot to say, I wondered if this was just how weddings are and decided to invite only close friends and family as she requested. But her interference didn't stop there. She had opinions on everything from the ceremony, entertainment, and decorations to the menu. While I've heard weddings are for the parents, following her demands would vastly exceed our budget. Fortunately, my in-laws said they would cover half of the wedding costs, but suddenly they changed their tune, saying, "Weddings are for the bride." So I ended up paying for the extra expenses driven by her demands. The wedding turned out to be a gaudy display of her bad taste, not at all what I envisioned. I tried to cut costs on the sly, but she scolded me for not following her instructions, saying it made the wedding look shabby. Even after the wedding, when I thought I could distance myself from her, my husband made a shocking move. And despite knowing I wanted to avoid her, he insisted we move in with his parents. Our new home was canceled without my knowledge, and my belongings had to be sent to his parents' house. I was speechless to find that everything had been arranged without my consent. The wedding preparations were all left to me. No matter how much I discussed the budget overruns due to her demands, it was as if they didn't hear me. My pre-wedding anxieties had ballooned too large to ignore. We planned an overseas honeymoon to a place I'd always dreamed of visiting, but thinking of returning to live with her dampened my excitement. While my husband was uncooperative with the wedding planning, he eagerly arranged our flight and hotel for the honeymoon. I was pleased, thinking he had chosen a romantic place for us. Utterly left all the payments to me in my pre-marriage bliss. I was just happy. He helped it all. Little did I know, this was the beginning of a terrible turn of events. After the wedding, I was approaching our honeymoon with mixed feelings due to the ceremony and the impending cohabitation. Despite everything, I tried to look forward to the trip as it was with the man I loved and married. However, as I woke up in the middle of the night to prepare for our flight, my husband, John, nonchalantly dropped a bombshell. "I've decided to go with Mom instead." I was checking our luggage when I heard this. I was so shocked that I couldn't comprehend his words and just froze. What? What are you talking about? This is our honeymoon. It's different from a normal trip. Why is your mother coming alone? Besides, I only paid for 2 tickets and the hotel for 2. In my agitation, I rattled off these questions quickly, only for my husband to say something even more unbelievable. I never said I was going on a trip with you, did I? Don't make me laugh. Of course. I'm going with Mom. This trip is a way to repay her for everything she's done for me. You should stay here and clean the house for our new life. As he said this, he started to tear my passport forcefully. I couldn't believe what was happening in front of my eyes and was speechless, just watching my passport being destroyed. Then his mother, fully made up, entered our room without knocking. "John, are you ready?" Seeing her, my husband's face lit up. "Yeah, all good. We can finally go on an overseas trip without any interruptions." I was appalled by the smiling and laughing pair of mother and son. I realized I had almost married a terrible person. I had been wondering how to get along with my mother-in-law in our married life, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. My choice from the beginning was fundamentally wrong. I understand everything about you and your mother now. Although I had to say something, my words seemed like mere sore grabs to them. The laughing, my husband and his mother laughed together. As the honeymoon that I was happy my husband helped with turned out to be for his mother. He had been eager to make the flight and hotel reservations because they were booked under his mother's name from the start, and all the expenses were left to me. Exit betrayal by my husband was immense, but my anger was greater than my sadness. But the dream of a cozy wedding and a perfect honeymoon with the man I loved, once-in-a-lifetime events, were ruined by them. Could this be happening? I was too shocked to accept the situation immediately, but soon after, I decided to act quickly for divorce. As it turns out, I had something that could help with the divorce. I had been recording and filming various moments from the wedding preparations to now, initially to preserve memories of these significant life events. What started as a pure intention to keep beautiful memories had turned into a record of my mother-in-law's malice and harassment. Yet ironic that what I considered stopping several times would now be useful in this way. I began to repack my belongings that had just been moved in a few days ago. Ironically, since I had only unpacked the essentials, it didn't take long to pack everything up again. Just were my husband and his mother at the airport by now? As thinking about it filled me with indescribable anger, so I tried not to dwell on it. That's wanting to erase any trace of my brief stay in this house. I decided to thoroughly clean everything I had touched. After finishing our bedroom, I was cleaning the living room when I stumbled upon a shocking discovery. It was evidence of my husband embezzling money from his company. He was responsible for managing the company's revenue, but he was reporting less to the company and pocketing the difference. Moreover, it seemed his mother was complicit, as she meticulously noted in her diary the actual revenue, the amount pocketed by my husband, and detailed lists of brand bags, clothes, and shoes he bought her with that money. The amount was substantial, and that diary was carelessly left in plain sight in the living room, making it clear they weren't thinking straight. I was speechless at my colleague and now husband's wrongdoing and shuddered at the enormity of the situation. For a moment, I thought maybe working at the same company could smooth things over discreetly, but I quickly dismissed the idea. Why should I help someone who abandoned me for a trip with his mother? I took the evidence of embezzlement to our company. Isn't my colleagues surprised to see me, since I was supposed to be on my honeymoon, bombarded me with questions. I openly shared everything about how John and his mother went on the honeymoon, how my passport was torn, and that I paid for everything. Colleagues, seniors, and bosses were shocked and angry at John. After thanking my concerned colleagues, I headed to the executive area. 7, unbeknownst to anyone, including John and his mother. One of the top executives at our company is my uncle. I joined the company without my uncle's help to avoid being labeled as someone who gotten through connections. He was an executive unrelated to human resources, and after joining, I asked him to keep our relationship secret. My uncle, who has no children, doted on me like his own since I was a child. We went on many trips together, and he often secretly bought me things I wanted, much to my parents' chagrin. After joining the company, we worked in different areas and hadn't met since exchanging a secret smile at the induction ceremony. I knocked on my uncle's door and explained the situation to his secretary, who then let me in. The uncle greeted me with a beaming smile, which quickly turned to concern. Are you supposed to be on your honeymoon? What are you doing here? Seeing his familiar, kind face made me break down in tears. And to the day, he was furious, a look I had never seen before. I told him in detail about John's embezzlement, handing over the documents as evidence. My uncle promised to hold an executive meeting and take swift action. He then asked if I was going back to my parents' house and suggested we go for a nice meal first and that he would drop me off afterward. Despite the incredible ordeal with my mother-in-law hijacking my honeymoon, I was deeply grateful to have people who warmly welcomed me no matter what. A week later, John and his mother returned from their honeymoon. They called, furious that I hadn't picked them up from the airport and hadn't stayed home cleaning as they had instructed. By then, I had already hired a top divorce lawyer recommended by my uncle and parents. Ignoring John's rant, I said, "It's ridiculous to think I would pick up someone I'm divorcing or obediently clean the house. I'm done listening to you." John was momentarily speechless, then started yelling even louder. "You think you can talk to me like that? I married you. Even though your plan, you'll never get married again if you divorce me." My mother is furious. "Them back right now and cook for us? Be tired of foreign food and want a nice meal." His son had changed completely since tearing up my passport and revealing his true nature. "I've already hired a lawyer for the divorce. Can you discuss the property division and other details with them, lawyer?" "What are you talking about? Property division? I'm not getting divorced, and I definitely won't pay in property division." A Perry in the background, his mother sensed something was wrong and started yelling, "Give me the phone, you stupid wife." I said, No, and about your embezzlement, the company knows about it. Expect a call from them. You might need a lawyer too. And up and indifferent to John's panic on the other end after hanging up my phone. My phone kept ringing nonstop, so out of annoyance, I blocked the number. Since I had informed my uncle of the honeymoon schedule, it seemed he immediately called my husband in for questioning after our conversation. The evidence I gave my uncle led to an investigation that revealed the extent of the embezzlement. It turned out my husband, John, had embezzled an astronomical amount. This was when John was called in. He desperately tried to defend himself in front of the CEO and a row of executives. According to John's fabricated story, I feel I was the mastermind behind the embezzlement, and he had tried to stop me. Losing patience, my uncle shouted, "My niece would never do such a thing. It was you and your mother who embezzled, and we have confirmed this with all relevant parties. You're lucky we don't take you straight to the police." And you fool! Realizing everything was exposed, and that his wife was the niece of a top executive, John was in a state of shock. That day, I visited the company to return the wedding gifts to my colleagues, given my impending divorce. Some of my colleagues and seniors who attended the wedding refused to take back the gifts, insisting I use them for my future. As I was enveloped in this warm atmosphere, my foolish husband arrived. John, crying and begging, said, "Why did you hide that you're the niece of a top executive? Please, I was wrong. Let's start over. Talk to your uncle for me. Get me back in the company. Or hitset pralacy. Make the embezzlement go away with his help." Disgusted, I said, "Do you even understand what you're saying? Are you okay in the head? In this situation, divorce is the only option. Reflect on your embezzlement and pay for your crimes." As I pushed him away, he clung to me desperately, but my colleagues called security and he was dragged away. Following this, John was immediately fired. The company sued him for damages related to the embezzlement. My father-in-law, a sensible man, stopped my mother-in-law from contacting me after learning the whole story. I had wondered why my reasonable father-in-law allowed the honeymoon hijacking. He later apologized and explained that he thought my mother-in-law was going on a domestic trip with friends and was looking forward to a week without her nagging. Returning home, I found my father-in-law packing my belongings, fully supportive of my decision to leave. We didn't talk much due to our heightened emotions, but he's a sensible and kind man who would have stopped them if he had known. I considered quitting my job, embarrassed by the whole ordeal, but my uncle arranged a transfer to a branch office, thinking work would be a good distraction. The divorce proceeded surprisingly smoothly, thanks to a competent lawyer with my father-in-law's involvement. That when we were planning our marriage, it became apparent that my husband, and John, had almost no savings, and his family, being a typical salaried household with a spendthrift mother, didn't have much savings either. This was something my father-in-law had mentioned with a wry smile. Given the extremely short duration of our marriage, The property division turned out to be quite substantial. Remarkably, my father-in-law sold their family home to pay it off. The house was located in a closely knit community outside the city. When we got married, my mother-in-law, always concerned with appearances, had invited neighbors at all, and the gossip started to spread rapidly when I returned to their house on the date of the supposed honeymoon trip, only to leave with my belongings. The neighborhood had what you might call a town speaker, a lady who spread news quickly. The rumors got embellished to the point that living there became impossible for them. My mother-in-law, who cared deeply about public image, had accepted me, a plain person, into the family partly because I worked at a large, reputable company like her son. This status was significant for her, but this status crumbled due to her actions. Becoming the perfect gossip material for the neighbors, my mother-in-law likely found it unbearable to continue living in their home under those circumstances. My father-in-law probably felt compelled to pay for the embezzlement damages caused by his son. I can't help but feel a sense of justice served towards my husband and mother-in-law, but I do feel sorry for my father-in-law. My husband, having been fired in order to pay for the damage and shocked by my not returning, apparently fell into a mental breakdown. Unable to work, he's now living in a small apartment, brooding over his circumstances. Disappointed by her son's downfall, my mother-in-law also became reclusive. My father-in-law, fed up with her, considered divorce and asked me to refer him to the lawyer I used. I immediately contacted my uncle, who arranged for a lawyer to help him. I hope my father-in-law can lead the life he desires. Thanks to the company's president and my uncle, I was transferred to a branch office where I'm working happily with wonderful colleagues and bosses. In an office with many people my age, I'm deeply grateful to my uncle. The only regret I have is missing the honeymoon trip to the country we had planned to visit. With the unexpectedly large property division, I plan to take a leisurely trip abroad once things settle down a bit.